The essential reason our American judicial penitentiary system fails and does not actually do the job, does not keep society safe, does not guide our society to avoid the bigger problems of human society, is quite simple to understand, actually. It's not a complex theory, it's a very obvious situation. Let's take Facebook, for example. Facebook has rules that you're not supposed to say certain things or threaten people, and so they have language that they go by. If you say certain things, they constitute one of the they constitute one of the breaches that they consider one of these labels of moral misconduct. They reprimand you, they suspend you, they block you, they kick you out of Facebook. The reality of Facebook is that people say the worst things all the time. People are constantly insulting, saying sexual things that can be constituted as sexual harassment. If you were to technically take to the letter the definition of some of these rules that Facebook has, and you actually examined everything everybody says all the time, people would be getting suspended all the time. Everybody would be getting suspended. Nobody would be participating, or we would turn into Teletubbies. That we talking like winky winky and never a cuss, never any implication of any kind of innuendo, because everything can be constituted. If you look at the context, maybe a more expanded context, you could construe harassment, you could construe sexual innuendos, threats of various kinds. In any case, the whole thing is ridiculous, because really people on the internet, on IM technology, which is instant message technology, are not what they write. They're not behaving according to what you see written. People decide to write something. So that means that there is no motivation. You can't connect a motivation to an actual action. My coffee was boiling over. You can't connect a supposed behavior to directly to a motivating true behavior. Okay, I got distracted there for a second. But in any case, so what happens? Facebook decided to. I'm sure that somebody at some point realized this, but they decided to not change it, to leave these things. Perhaps the part that you can't really contextualize according to what people write is something that has escaped a lot of lawmakers and social network rule designers. I can decide to write something for a desired effect and not mean it. Now, the person who's judging that which I wrote can't really accuse me for having intended that, because he doesn't or she doesn't know why I wrote it. Unfortunately, we're so trigger happy in America that we fly right past that, and we say things like, "Well, why did you write it then? You must mean something evil." But in reality, you can't construe an actual intent or motivation to do something in aiming to. in the context of true behavior. It's only what you're actually judging, to make it brief, what you're actually judging on Facebook is a person's actions with a keyboard. That's what you're doing. The person wrote a word on the keyboard, and so you can judge them because you can actually prove the intent that the finger touched the letter T, and that resulted in a T coming out on the other computer. So that is a real transposition of behavior, intent, action. But you can't say that the person intended to sexually harm somebody because of what they wrote with the computer. This is a new area. Everything is growing so fast, changing so fast in communications, that we bring with us all this stuff that, and we know that people find it a lot easier to be mean, cruel, unfair to people than to see if maybe they didn't mean to do that, to be good people and say, well, what are the circumstances that pushed that person to do that before we accuse them. So I took a tangent there. The point is, like in Facebook, there are other circumstances and other reasons for why people would end up writing what they do, that have to do maybe with them reacting, for example, to what the atmosphere of a group is like. So if everybody, in order to be able to say something in this group, has to talk a certain way, has to be a little bullyish, a little not so factful, a little exaggerating, in order for them to get in the flow of the conversation, then people maybe end up talking or writing, in other words, a certain way that they wouldn't have otherwise. So this is also circumstance. There's a lot of circumstance that happens around the reality of the PC, of the laptop, before the person who's typing, that is the reason for why people write what they write. And yet we are so judgmental that we have become slow in realizing this, and what we do is we are judging harshly people for what is being done on a keyboard, not with their physical body, but it's almost like punishing somebody because the chord they hit on a guitar shattered crystal. He's a china breaker. He's a crystal breaker. Arrest him. He wasn't meaning to shatter crystal. He was just playing his instrument. That's kind of what's happening with IM technology. And but now that I made that point, and perhaps it's not as relevant as what I am making this video for, to prove why our judicial system fails, is that just in the same way, what happens in the real world, we have this idea that there's people that are good all the time, and then there's bad people, and we think that somebody who goes to college and has a nice family and talks a certain way, they wouldn't get into trouble. They wouldn't end up in prison. And the people who do end up going to jail or what have you, we automatically assume that they had it coming to them anyways because of how they are. This is something subconscious that we do, so that humanity does. It's so tempting to break off into tangents of why these things occur. All of a sudden it becomes a different subject matter. And so this is the reality of living society. People all the time are breaking laws. They are all the time doing things that were a judge, a fly in the wall, would have to say, well, that guy I could throw that guy in jail just for what he just did. And this is happening all the time. This is the reality of behavior. Behavior is human, it's natural, it's interaction, it's contextual, it's reactive to what other people do. The legal system would have you acquire a perspective that that solely blames the individual for having behaved or done something, when in reality we're all connected. We're all wanting to belong, and we do it through communication. We assess if something's going to be accepted before we say it. So everything we do in actuality is contingent and relative and connected and forecasting of how it will be interpreted, how it will be seen. Nothing is individualistically emanated by people. We're always in a constant state of circumstantial context. This is the reality of human behavior. And so when people quote unquote do something, it has to do with other things that have happened, that have been taught, that have been accepted, that there's usually a momentum. Why do people in court or before the judge or before the police look so shocked and surprised? Because in reality we're just trying to be human, and in the truest of our perceptions, we were actually just going along with everyone else. But this is almost like high science. Somebody right now is thinking, oh, I see, you're trying to take the somebody made me do it defense, because we're used to accusing, we're used to finding the person culprit. But without getting into that, so what happens when a person ends up in court? The court is supposed to should find out what happened. If if the behavior was truly, well, this is a little bit difficult because some will tell you that the court is supposed to prove if a person broke the law or not. That's not what it's doing. That wouldn't be so hard to do, to see if you actually broke or did not break a law. Some will say to prove if it was the person who did it or not. That is also not so hard to prove. What the court attempts to do is the reason for which laws were created, was to see if somebody's a danger to society, uncontrollably wounding or hurtful of society's integrity, of the life of others, of the freedom of others, and will not know how to contain themselves in the symbiosis of society. When somebody is, basically that's what the law tries to do, or the judicial system tries to do, to grab those pariahs that would undo who would hurt the flow or the harmony of civilization, and try to do something about it. Unfortunately, it doesn't try to heal transgressors or people who don't care enough about society or themselves or others, and try to repair or heal whatever is causing them to act up. It seeks to punish, and inherently this is why this is the first essential reason why it fails. Because since we're all trying to belong, and since we're all trying to be part of the whole, and we all react and forecast what others do, we actually never how can I say this? We actually never I forgot what I had in my mind, but it was becoming a tangent anyways. What happens is that we take the person to court, and in court, what happens? What happens in our American court system? We have two people, a polar situation of a person who's going to try to defend you and a person who's going to try to prove that that you're guilty, basically. This polarity, this opposition of intentions of proving you're guilty or you're innocent, is not reflective of the reality of human behavior at all. It's completely on its own trip. It basically tries to make something out of a situation, and what it has made is a combative opposition of logic that tries to prove different things. If the person was there based on allegations of and connect to the evidence and a lot of things, but it doesn't actually try to assess if this person, for example, really was justified in hurting that person because he or she was afraid that somebody in their family was going to get hurt, or they were going to get hurt, or they were being cheated or robbed, and so they didn't have any other recourse and they reacted, or they felt they were being abused and so they reacted and they tried to take justice into their own hands, or whatever the real social situation was. It doesn't try to see. It doesn't try to discover it. It doesn't try to see the true social human mechanisms and dynamics that were going on to see if this person, what happened to this person, first of all, because that's what really we should be doing, is trying to find out what happened to this person. That's what a judicial system that tries to take care of its society, of the society of its creator ought to do, of its creator, mankind, ought to do. It ought to try to understand what happened to this person, understand the circumstances around the behavior of this person, so that we can better society and we can take these types of problems and situations, and this person in particular, and instead what it does is it looks for a culprit and then tries to punish it, so that supposedly others will be scared, like a herd of deer, that, oh look, we don't want to do that, look at what happened to him, he got caught by the crocodiles, let's all go the other way. Or be afraid of falling in jail, and that should deter us from doing the same thing. Well, obviously we have all of human history to prove to us that doesn't work. Nobody thought, hey, maybe we should try a different judicial system, a different way of ordering society, because we've been throwing people in jail for killing people for thousands of years, and people are still killing people. So maybe we should go about this differently. Apparently nobody feels that that's a worthy pursuit. We continue to punishing and judging, looking for who to blame, looking for the singular one that ought to be burdened with all of the reason for which that occurred in society. We put it all on one person, and that person takes it all. We don't consider the circumstances. We don't consider what made that person do that. Nothing. It's a very brutal, as far as intellect or intelligence in an institution of civilization. It's completely rudimentary and brutal. It doesn't work. It doesn't, and it's completely ineffective. It's almost like a hobby, like a pastime, like a game, like something. Well, let's just set up a game so that we all have to chase after. One group has to chase after another group, but we're actually not doing what it's supposed to do for society. So in the courthouse, in the courtroom, what happens is there is this situation where one person becomes intent on proving that the person is guilty, that they need to be punished for that. and the other one is going to try to save you and see if they can get away. So what we already know, and we almost make fun of, and we don't do anything about it still, is that borderline lie, both sides. They all lie. Police officers make up reports. Lawyers say, don't say that, don't talk to them. We're going to hide that evidence on both sides. They all try to, all of them. The only one that apparently is not unethical is the judge, who looks at everything quietly there and then says, boom, But everybody else is manipulating and finagling and trying to win. That's not doing justice for the situation that happened. That's not helping society. That's just taking the guy that was put on the cross and pulling in one place or the other. It doesn't do one way or the other. It doesn't do anything for healing society. People say, and people reinforce this with outlandish things like, well, at least we put him out of circulation. Actually that makes sense before an appreciation of its failure, of the failure of the institution, because you say, well, what maybe makes sense is that we remove them from society and there's less of those people, which is completely cave days brutal too, because it's amazing. We're so intelligent in some ways, and yet we can't design an institution that heals society instead of creating some kind of sport enact around the unfortunate one who gets basically caught or not caught. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. The reason a judicial penitentiary the penitentiary should not exist, because we already said it fails. What we should be having is some form of social redemption that is natural, that works with what the human being naturally, who acknowledges they went too far, they hurt society, they hurt another, they did something that upset a bunch of people, what have you. Because we all want to be included. We all want to be part of the whole. Nobody likes to be the one that everybody's now talking about, how they beat up their wife, or how they stole, or how they're doing all this stuff to society. Nobody, because we naturally have like a spring that brings us back to the center. We run, we try to get away with it, we run with a flock of people who like to break all the rules. But as soon as we perceive that the greater number of society has defined us, it's almost like the person, this reminds me of something they did in a place I lived recently, where if somebody stole something from the store, and it was a small town, so we all saw each other all the time, they put a picture of that person above the register. So when everybody knew, that person stole something, and they see you every day. And actually, that is, it's kind of poetic in its truth to the human psyche, because that person will not do that again, because they don't want to be known by their friends as somebody who steals. Nobody wants to be known by anybody that there's somebody who steals. Everything works perfectly the way nature made it. We are a whole organism socially. Unfortunately, that system didn't really work, because human beings we haven't evolved in this capacity, which would be pretty progressive, and yet we are not refined in that progression yet. So the people at the store were unfair, or they decided they wanted to do it just to embarrass somebody, and they would let somebody else go. Well, anyways, it didn't really, but it's an attempt. It's an attempt, and I think if we had a more human, more evolutionarily, ecologically, scientific, truer approach in the judicial system, we might actually succeed in and helping society, um, care more for itself instead of hide from one another because of the law, because of police. We hide our actions, we hide our behavior. Since we all want society to be happy and healthy and thriving, there would be a way, and we don't have to be necessarily, a Scandinavian society where, oops, if you do something wrong, nobody approves it, and everybody shuns you because you've been known to be, but in a sense, it's worthy of exploration. I don't want to keep going because we all want to get to that final rendition, that final well elaborated solution, which of course I don't have. But the important thing is to say that when somebody goes to court in the United States, they're far from receiving any kind of help in becoming a better person. They're far from being a guarantee that they will not be that life will not treat them worse than what they have done already with their lives. There's a risk that they will be thrown in jail when they're innocent, that they will be accused when they're innocent, and we know this is, and there's thousands of people in jail who are innocent in the States. And so it's disastrously, monstrously failing as a system. Not one of our politicians seems to think this is a worthy matter to pursue in their campaigns. Nobody wants to talk about prison reform or judicial reform or officer training reform. Why are we so afraid to tackle authority in America? This is a serious problem. We're letting the machinery of our country have its way with us. We're letting ourselves be the chum, the ground beef of machinery that has no heart, no mind, no sensitivity, no intellect. It's installed and it's set off to run, and then we put ourselves in front. Nobody wants to touch the things that are destroying or that are under which our lives are at the mercy of. Nobody wants to, no politician wants to say we have to bring judicial reform to the country. We're grossly, it's ineffective. It's failing. It's landing innocent people in jail. It's abusive. It's putting people in jail for 50 years for having done basically, and just the reasoning behind a lot of our laws is so judgmental in essence, not in just plain pursuit, but it's like we're gonna teach him a lesson. So if he steals candy 3 times, that's gonna land him, because that way he'll learn to not be a thief. So we destroy a person's life for 20 years of their lives because we want to teach them a lesson. I mean, the thinking, it's like we're still in Puritan days. We're still the Quakers getting off the boat. I mean, it's unbelievable. And nobody feels in our government, in our country, nobody feels this is a worthy political campaign pursuit. I bet that if one of our candidates, we get candidates that are kind of, they call him liberal, and liberal is synonymous to weak. And so as a result, because everybody believes that, we get some nice guy like Bernie Sanders, that comes. Why shouldn't somebody who has radical, strong ideas of transformation and change not be strong and aggressive? It is precisely what we need. Somebody who knows very well why things have to be changed, and he is angry. And other people would then feel, hey, finally, finally somebody sees this, and they would get excited, and it would have success. Instead, every time we have a good person, They're Jimmy Carters. They're people who, oh, well, let's be good Christians, and blah, 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 blah. They get, 10% of the votes, and they disappear. I don't know. I think change requires, it's like when you're steering, requires not violence, but violent motivation, in a sense that when you have to steer a canoe to change course in order to not go down the waterfall, you almost paddle angrily to stop the canoe from going down there. Why do we have such a problem with talking about how wrong it is to continue ignoring police brutality, abusive sentencing, innocent people going to jail? These are all subjects that nobody wants to touch in our country. Why? Can somebody explain to me why that is happening? Are we so afraid of? Are we beaten down to shut up and not stand up for ourselves and just be a brick in the wall, as Pink Floyd said? I don't know. There's a lot of interesting, compelling, areas of discussion here that are worth talking about. So the judicial system basically fails because instead of this person's actions and behavior being talked about by the court, what happens is a tug of war, a duel, a sports confrontation between two lawyers, essentially, and their various manipulative, scheming strategies by which to play with this person's freedom. Now, freedom should be the thing that the court ought to want to preserve as much as possible, because a free mind is a mind that can heal. A free mind is a mind that can find redemption, that can find a different atmosphere of friends, a different life, a different course of, it can find change, transformation. And one person healing means all of society heals. So freedom ought to be something that the court would not be arguing about whether to give, or it's like saying, if somebody has to go camping, you don't question if they're going to take food with them. That's a given. You better take some food with you to make it through your camping venture, right? You can question whether you take a tent because maybe you'll find a cave, right? But food you want to take. Well, freedom is what you want the person who's having a hard time not hurting society, not congenializing with others, hurting others, whatever problem, whatever disaster is happening to their lives. See, we don't even see it as something bad happening to that person. We see it as a person that needs to be punished for what they're doing. When somebody hurts others, that's something bad happening to them. We need to understand that as a judicial intellect, whose purpose is to heal society. People don't want to hurt others. In reality, we end up doing things because of society, because of the world. But you have to understand this logic in a spiritual capacity of intellect. It's not a discovery. Everything I'm saying, I learned from somebody who said it to me, who's taught me. It's already out there. It's already in books. We just need to apply it to the way we use our intelligence towards helping society, healing society, guiding society through our judicial system instead of a penitentiary system. Correctional seems to be a little bit closer to the right idea. How to repair this life. Not let's see how many years will do the trick behind bars. It's grotesque. We have to stop this. We cannot be Okay, I'm gonna go somewhere else. I was gonna say something. How can we be the leading country of the world and not be vanguard in our judicial intellect, in our intellect of humanities? How can we pretend to be moralistic upon the behavior of other countries and not lead the world with human sciences as we apply them to our own citizens, and then we expect to make these discourses of, that's wrong, that leader needs to be killed. Well, okay, that government needs to be overthrown. Well, never mind. I don't know if I'm trying to be funny here or what, but I think I made my point. And so this is terrible. This is horrible. People who end up in our judicial system, they are not even being being seen for the actions they did. At the very, let's say even the most basic, primitive system that would really try to understand what happened that day, that's not even being done. Because when these two forces come on full force and they start pulling at each other and hiding evidence and saying this and saying that, say it that way, don't let that person speak. How can it be admissible in a judicial system to not allow evidence when you're trying to find the truth about something? I mean, these ideas, it's all, yeah, I understand, it's a mechanism. Well, if it's a mechanism, that's the way it has been working, and it's just a mechanism that works this way. If it's a mechanism, it should be easy to change. What is difficult to change is life, the living experience, the social, conscious living experience. But institutions, the law, governments, these are designs on paper and ink. We designed it, what way? Okay, how long will it take us to design something more advanced, more modern? One afternoon, let's sit down and redesign it. Boom, that was all the effort. To redesign our institutions, our governments, our ways of guiding society, our laws. I see the legal system more as education, as something that we can't have everybody on one page at the same time. So the legal system would be something that we can refer to. It should be more of that. We can refer to see when things get complicated, when we're too many people for the amount of time we have, too many different languages, different cultures, all acting together, wanting to do things their own way. Then we have a reference to guide society. It shouldn't be a place where you face the guillotine or salvation, one of the two. That makes absolutely no sense, because then that means it's a judicial system that's not serving the health, the well-being, and the thriving quality of society. It's not serving its health. It's just looking for things to pick out of it. And that's not why we have a judicial system and a legal system, is it? Okay, so I hope I made the point of this. I still keep thinking of those situations. It's so hideous, so hideous how. And the thing is, I've heard other people say this. I've heard a lot of people say what I just said, parts of what I just said at different times, in different instances, in different ways. And what my biggest question these days is, therefore, how? Because you look at YouTube, and there's some great people. I've been watching a lot of people who actually are consistent. They have channels with shows that they format perfectly, like your network TV station or something. It's unbelievable. And there's the Innocence Project. They're doing it's small for what actually is going on in so far as numbers go, but what my big question these days is, how do we bridge? How do we jump from all the people that are finally, because we were really bad 40 years ago, we were afraid to talk about anything that was about our own government's mistakes, or God forbid we mentioned, a lot of things. It was terrible. And now I'm seeing these past 20 years, people are saying things. First they were ballsy and kind of clumsy, kind of not very neat in how they would say things against America, very brutally, very brashly. Now we're becoming more refined in our criticisms, and we don't sound like we're attacking ourselves. It's almost like at first we needed to be able to attack ourselves, and it was very inaccurate. But once that, now it's not. Now it's really looking at understanding the situation in an overall evolution of this change that the country has been going through. Luckily, thank God. What took us so long. In any case, you see a lot of people that are now finally starting to say things that before would not have been said. But what I'm asking myself is, how are we going to take the leap from the proper analysis, from the better ideas, from the uncovering criticisms and everything, and let's say that even some people would start proposing substitutions, transformations. How are we going to get that? How are we going to get all of this to make it to where it gets implemented, to where politicians who are running for office say, and I want to do this. Right now they would have to say, what Young Turks are talking about on YouTube. And I don't think that would gain the respect of more fearful politicians that have been around longer than the people who would say something like that. But somehow somebody would have to start talking in government and at the level of existing government politicians or up and coming politicians about well elaborated, mature reasons that touch on real human sciences that explain the error, what it was causing, and what would need to be done completely differently, in a way that it captures the imagination of the young and the attention of those who could not imagine any a different way of running the country, could not imagine just how hideously wrong to ourselves how damaging to ourselves our institutions are being, and gain the respect of those people. That's the place those people would be. And how do we, who are down in the trenches, talking, arguing, fighting, making little videos or great channels or what have you, get to from where we are, not how we get to do it, but how do we get from this place to start producing, generating people, professionals who start actually making the changes, calling the shots, steering in a completely different direction, introducing new ideas, and wanting willfully to have those new ideas come in the place of other old things and substitute the force that it takes to remove something and put something new in its place. That's my big question right now. Is how are we going to get to where we are now, where there's thousands and thousands of people who are finally starting to think, see a little bit more realistically the reality that we're in, and get to people appearing on the scene who, like at other times we have known, We have known. People that bring great, sudden, radical change seem to come easier. It seems to have come easier to the older world. It seems where there seems to have been less system, less apparatus, and more spontaneous human will, motivation, and action. Now it seems that everybody's grabbing onto something that's giving a sense of security or structure, and everybody's just more mechanized, it seems. And so that machines are cold, machines are not warm, machines are cold. So if we go by obeying systems, we're not going to be very human about the world we make, are we? Alright, my dog is bored. She's telling me she wants to go for a walk before it gets dark. So long. I hope this did 45 minutes. That's not too bad. I made longer, less interesting, more harder to follow ones. I think this one came out a little bit easier to follow, I hope. I would appreciate comments, anything, anybody who's been watching, how I'm trying to get better and how I'm trying to be more succinct, more to the point. Please let me know. Leave your comments. Thanks. Ciao.